not the scribe on Twitter. Sir, before we get into the Sweet 16, and you can tell me whether or not Caleb Love is going to do it again to Duke. We'll get to that in a minute. Your thoughts on Elliot Cadeau in the transfer portal and what it says about UNC basketball.
It says that Hubert Davis is able to have just a hard conversation with a guy that clearly didn't fit. And you could make the case that despite what he did the previous year, this conversation should have happened a year ago. We saw in Elliot Cadeau a point guard that jump shot came and went, was defensively basically the focus of every offense was to, okay, this kid is too small, and I hope that Elliot Cadeau can go somewhere and thrive. I just have questions. I know me and you've talked about this privately before, but I do have questions on whether Elliot Cadeau is really a high-level college point guard at this point.
All right, so here's what I said, because I think the first part of your response, you and I are in agreement. I think it just says that UNC basketball is now taking it seriously. And because to me,
I can't go that far.
Well,
yet.
I mean,
I can't go that far yet.
Okay, all right, but I'm maybe just with this particular conversation, because in years past, it would have been like an affront to UNC basketball for a player, a 2-year starter, somebody who was instrumental in their success over these 2 years, whatever success they had this year, that for him to leave would have been seen as a weakness for the program. Oh my gosh, how do you let a starter go? But I think it says that they're looking at their roster and taking this process seriously, and that Cadeau wasn't right for this particular team. I do think that Cadeau could have worked had the rest of the team been better. They certainly could have gotten more out of Cadeau this year and even last year, although last year's roster was pretty good. He was just a freshman. But he wasn't markedly better this year. Maybe he wasn't any better this year than he was last year. But I think that's largely due to the fact that the roster wasn't any good.
Well, the roster wasn't. The roster was misshapen, and as we've talked about before, Hubert the GM screwed Hubert the coach. I think we have to start there when it comes to the roster, and that's why Jim Tanner's there. And it's essentially to streamline this process to where we can make sure that the best, in theory, that the best possible roster was there. I think that I do believe that Hubert and them are taking this serious, and so far, so much so that I'm calling 2025 Operation Hubert's Last Stand, because we all know what's going to happen if they disappoint and it's not a Sweet 16 or an Elite Eight run, or dare I say they miss the NCAA tournament again. But at the same point, like, I do think that a lot of what's coming right now and a lot of what North Carolina needs to do is taking a very hard look. Now, granted, I do believe that the best part about this is the introspection and Hubert realizing I can't stick with my guy. I was wrong here. I hope that this conversation extends to a few other people, because were it me, the only two Tar Heels that were playing this year that I would bring back are Ian Jackson and Drake Powell. Those are the only two. Everyone else could go find themselves in the portal, and I would go find 10 other guys right quick.
Yeah, I said earlier in the show that they looks like they need to bring in 7 or 8 new players. Maybe I was underselling how many new players. And I don't know if you and I agree on this part or not. I've been saying this all year long. To me, the foundation for your program must be in recruiting out of high school, supplementing the portal. It's going to be different this year for UNC, just like it's going to be different for Will Wade. It's going to be a lot of portal guys in year one, but it has to be high school recruiting. That has to be your foundation. And maybe you get some guys that stick around longer than they were anticipating. Duke got 3 years out of Tyrese Proctor, 2 years and maybe more out of Caleb Foster. Certainly started playing well. He looks like he's emotionally invested. I don't know if that'll change, in 2 or 3 weeks. It likely will, but it might not. But you have to be able to have high school recruiting be the basis for your team.
Absolutely. I think the Duke model is the model that North Carolina And to an extent, NC State should follow. You are a established program with sneaker ties and sneaker money, and you can locally you can bring in a lot of dollars as well. You should be able to go get those 4 stars, 5 stars, because everybody, look, the Rick Pitino's of the world, the Richard Pitino's of the world, they're all going to go get those transfer portal guys. The only way you're ever going to build something sustainable is if you have guys that are there from the ground up. Again, you bring up Tyrese Proctor. Isaiah Evans is another example of this, where you might actually get another year of him out of this, because if you're noticing, the fringe second-round picks aren't even entertaining going to the draft or doing any of the combine stuff. They're coming back because they know they're getting paid.
Yep.
So now it's become a thing where NIL has established this basis of, hey, maybe it's a better idea to not ply your wares in the G League for another year. Why don't you just come back to school? There are more eyeballs, and you basically end up giving yourself a shot at the first round. So I do think establishing yourself with these high school guys, like you said, the Duke model is a very sustainable model to build a program on, and it's something that North Carolina and NC State should emulate.
Yeah, that's another thing I've been talking about for a while. People didn't even realize this. If we allow the athletes in college to get paid, then it stands to reason they might stick around longer. Amazing, isn't it? How much money did Armando Bacot make? He's a business man. Made tons of money. I used I don't know, I'm drawing a blank. Marcus Page. I used Marcus Page as he would have been the poster child for why these kids should get paid. His value as an athlete was never higher than when he was at UNC. All right, Konata Edwards, not a the scribe on Twitter, Eye on College Basketball podcast on CBS Sports. Is Caleb Love and Arizona the team that is going to derail the Duke wagon?
No. I think Arizona can defend. I think Arizona is going to give them a little bit more trouble than people think. But the team that's most likely to derail the Duke wagon right now is in San Antonio. And they're going to have to
the
go
Spurs?
through potentially – well, maybe. Well, not this current Spurs. Like, again, De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama are hurt. So I would put it Duke -1.5.
Oh, wow.
Now. So, but at this point, I think it's either got to be Houston or it's going to be whoever, if they see Auburn or Florida. Like, I think I don't think they're going to see anyone in Newark that's really going to give them any trouble. Now, granted, these are famous last words, and Caleb Love could etch himself to where he gets his number retired in 2 places. Because I would argue if he does anything like 30 points and knocks off Duke and ends the college career of Cooper Flagg on top of Coach K and Paolo Banchero, look, Arizona should retire his number, and so should Carolina at that point. But I don't think Duke is going to see anyone that's really going to give them any trouble until they see Houston or they see Florida. And unfortunately, I think it's just because the way they do everything, and they are a defense-first team, people seem to forget about that point. This is one of the best defensive teams in the nation. And again, their Ken Pom metrics, especially their net metrics, are similar to last year's UConn team. If you just look at that alone, you don't think they're going to get any trouble up until it's time until they get to the Riverwalk.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw, I couldn't listen to it, but I was at ESPN on yesterday, and Jay Williams and Richard Jefferson were going back and forth on the screen because they squared off in the 2001 national championship game, which Duke won by like 10 or something. And this Duke team's mindset reminds me of that Duke's team's mindset, in that they were not here to play games. They were here to do a job, and they took no prisoners while doing it. They were ruthless. I think this Duke team is ruthless. I understand that they let Carolina up off the mat in the game in the ACC semifinal. that Friday night.
Without their leader, though. That was without the head of the snake.
It was without Cooper.
The most ruthless amongst most of all of them. He is the most ruthless amongst all of them. That would have been a 35-point blowout in Charlotte if Cooper plays.
You're probably right. I shouldn't even say probably. I should just say you're right. Especially with his parents in the crowd, because they are also take no prisoners. I find them entertaining.
Who doesn't? I found that entire saga completely entertaining, even though it was just typical. It was typical. It was on brand for Duke. I will put it that way.
All right, Alabama BYU tonight. Who do you like?
If Alabama loses, I just love the way Kevin Young and BYU do things, and I think Richie Saunders is a very, very dangerous, and I think Yegor Demon is on a mission to prove that he's a lottery pick. I think Alabama has shown me way too many warts for me to ever trust them. I think it's BYU tonight.
I like BYU tonight, and plus defense optional, right?
Yeah, on both sides.
Yeah,
on both sides.
We're just going to see. We're going to see a lot of points. The total, I couldn't believe. I looked at the totals on my FanDuel app, and I'm like, really? 175.5. I'm going to watch this game.
Take the over. Take the over. Take the over.
Oh my gosh! All right, Florida, Maryland. Will Derek Queen be allowed to travel?
I love Derek Queen. I think he's the top 7 pick in this draft.
I do too. And it was a travel, but I don't care.
Exactly. Again, if it was a travel, they should have called it. I think Florida's a wagon. Florida's the other wagon in this tournament. I think they're going to end up seeing Duke in the finals in San Antonio. So I love Derek Queen. I love the Crab Five. Julian Reese is a monster rebounder, just like his sister. And I think it's going to be a close game. But I think we got our one close game out when UConn scared the life out of them.
Yeah.
So I do think that was the one chance to knock off Florida before San Antonio. And UConn missed. I don't think we're going to, again, the only other time we see them miss is in San Antonio, basically.
Yeah, I thought UConn kind of let them off the hook, in my opinion. I mentioned the sequence yesterday on the show, and we were talking about it. I think they had a 5-point lead and the ball after a live ball turnover, and they passed up a layup. Maybe it wasn't an uncontested layup, but I think at the very least you go to the foul line. Passed up a layup to give the ball. I think it was to Bell in the corner for a 3. And he kind of fumbled the ball out of bounds, and that was it. Fumbled
the ball out of bounds, and then they couldn't secure a rebound on a free throw.
Right.
And that was it, essentially.
That was Florida. Florida's lifeline was given right there, and that was that. Kentucky, Tennessee. Mark Pope's done a very good job with this crew. I don't think Tennessee – I thought Tennessee could have easily been a 1 seed. You couldn't make everybody a 1 seed, obviously. I like Tennessee here, but there's something about this Kentucky team that's different.
Kentucky is a again, unfortunately, as we know, it's a make-or-miss game with basketball. If you tell me Kentucky's hitting 40%, like 35, 38, 40% from 3, I'm telling you they win. If not, this feels like a Chaz Lanier game where Chaz Lanier goes for 30, 32, and it's a very ugly game, and Tennessee ends up winning that. I do think that this is probably, outside of BYU, Alabama, the most compelling game of the night.
Oh, it should be a blast. All right, final thing for you, Konata Edwards. Give me Juan Soto's line. Batting average, home runs batted in this year.
322, 40, 160.
160?
Yes.
Oh my God! You realize we're still the Mets, right?
Yes, I do. But I also I'm understanding this with the fact that I know that you're either pitching to Lindor or you're pitching to Soto.
Okay. And
Alonso's still there. So
okay, I've got 290,
41,
290,
really?
290, 43, 125. That'd be pretty good for year 1 in New York, even for Juan Soto. But I appreciate your level of optimism, sir.
I think Juan Soto is the second best player in baseball right now. right behind Ohtani. It's Ohtani, and then there's a gap, and then there's Juan Soto.
Yeah, there is a gap.
There's a gap. There's a gap. We have to appreciate the gap, but there's, again, having the second best play, having 2 top 7 players in baseball.
Yeah, pretty good.
Is a very good thing, especially for the Mets.
Yeah, I wish one of them could pitch, but that's not the way it works. Not the Scribe on Twitter, Konata Edwards, CBS Sports. Thank you very much, my man.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon.
You got it. Gosh, so much fun.